and gentlemen, with me today, I have a very special guest. A native Oklahoman, Mark Marshall began his career in motion pictures in 1978. During his first 10 years, he worked as a production assistant at Lucasfilm, headed by Star Wars creator George Lucas, and served as Steven Spielberg's personal assistant at Amblin Entertainment from 1984 to 1988. Mark, if you could expand on that a little bit for us.
Well, it was I don't know if you call it fate or luck or whatever, but actually I got into Lucasfilm. I took a summer course at University of Southern California back in summer of 1977, and one of the speakers at the class, which was in conjunction with Universal Studios, was a gentleman named Howard Kazanjian. And Howard had just been asked by George Lucas to produce the sequel to American Graffiti. And after class, I went up and asked if I could get on sets. And Howard, on my days off, would write me passes to Universal so I could visit some of the shows that were shooting on the lot, like Rockford Files, Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew Mysteries, Quincy, uh, shows like that. And
Wow.
I after the summer, I moved back to Oklahoma, but realized that I was going to have to be, you know, in LA if I wanted to work in the film business. And so I moved out in January of 78, and I called Howard every week about a job. And as my friend George Campbell says, there's a fine line between persistence and stalking. But I tried to be respectful and but I was persistent. And 8 months later, it paid off because Howard called with an offer of a job as a film runner on the production. So I was based in LA, and I would pick up the film at the airport. They were shooting in Central California, and take it to the lab, and the next morning would pick it up at the lab, look at the dailies with the timer, and then um, send it back up. And I did that for several months. But I worked out of the trailers, these temporary trailers that housed Lucasfilm South, which was publicity and legal and merchandising, and publishing. And at the end of the production, Howard asked if I'd enjoyed the experience, and I told him how much it meant to me and what I'd learned. And he said, "Well, do you want to stay on?" So I ended up staying at Lucasfilm for several years,
Wow.
and through Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark. And
Wow.
then I left Lucasfilm uh, while we were shooting, or I was at Lucasfilm. Um, Steven Spielberg came to direct Raiders. And George had production offices built in the new building that we had called the Egg Company. And so I ended up being Steven's projectionist at home at the invitation of Frank Marshall, who was no relation, but Frank was, kind of took me under his wing, called me his little brother. And then several years later, I ran into Steven on the Warner Brothers lot, and he offered me a job as the projectionist at Amblin, which had just been built on the Universal lot. Unfortunately, it had to be a union job, so I had suddenly no job, but ended up being Steven's personal assistant, which I did
Wow.
for 5 years. So, you know, I guess there was some kind of hand guiding, all the events. And then after leaving Amblin, I ended up going to work for Richard Donner.
Wow. That is quite an extensive career that you have there.
Yeah, like I said, I was very lucky. In the right place at the wrong time, right time. And, someone said I was the Forrest Gump of, um, of production. And I wasn't sure how to take that, but I think it just meant that, I brushed, uh, I was next to greatness for many years, learned a lot, and was just privileged to do so.
That is an amazing opportunity that you were given. Not a lot of people can say that they've gotten to work with the greats as long as you did. With that said, I actually have a list of films that I've seen online that you've worked on, and I would like for you to check or deny if you've worked on them.
Okay.
Okay. These are mostly your production roles. So if you've done production assistance, just let me know if you did, or give me the thumbs down if you did not.
Okay.
Number one, we have Free Willy.
Yes. Well, I was a producer.
That must have been absolutely incredible getting to work with the cast and seeing how everything was done. Uh, what was it like for you on that time?
Oh gosh. Well, it was a scary time because, I had been an assistant, I'd been a production assistant, I was a production representative for Dick Donner on the HBO series Tales from the Crypt, and so I was given much more responsibility than, I had been given in my assistant days, and so uh, during the hiatus of Tales, I worked uh, for co-producer Jenny Lou Tugin on Lethal Weapon 3 and Radio Flyer. And so when Free Willy came along, and Dick had toyed with directing it, he decided not to. And he made Jenny the producer, the main producer on the film. And Jenny said, okay, you're going to associate produce, which I did on the second film as well as, and then I co-produced the third installment. But, it was a lot more responsibility. There was a lot more riding on it. We flew under the radar at Warner Brothers. We were referred to as that whale movie, and nobody wanted to see the dailies. Nobody cared until we did our first test screening with the Warner executives there, Bob Daly, Terry Semel, I mean the heads of the studio, and we got the highest test scores in Warner history
Wow.
between kids, parents, and or adults and teenagers. And suddenly we were on the radar, and they gave us what we needed to finish the movie. But it was just, it was 4 years of film school every day, and a lot of things they don't teach you in film school. So it was a heady time, and but I was so grateful for the opportunity to be able to experience that and then build on it later.
That's absolutely insane. I can't even imagine what it's like getting to work with not just one of the greatest films about a whale of all time, but getting to work with some of the most extensive casts at that time period, because at that time you watched that movie and you just fell in love with that film. It was just one of those movies you could put on in a snowy day like today and you could just watch it over and over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I see it, and it's not that often that I watch it, but when I do, um, I look beyond the film and I think of the personal ties. The fact that
Yes.
I mean, Jason Richter, who played Jesse, is in his 40s now, which is strange. Or losing Augie Schellenberg, who played Randolph, or Michael Madsen. It's it becomes a personal thing, and so I mourn, I rejoice, all those things that that the film, they don't teach you in film school. You're going to get really attached to the crews you work with or to the casts you work with, and you may not see some of them again. So it's that's why I look at all films differently now, in that I know that the people that worked on those films went through probably a lot of the same things. And, I mean, with Goonies, I still keep in touch with the cast, 41 years later. And
Wow.
we're truly a family, which is something I never thought I would experience in the film industry.
That's amazing. It's become such an iconic film, The Goonies, which is actually one of the films that I had on this list for you, if you could confirm, which you just did. The second film that I have on this list is Harry Potter.
Yes, I did the first film.
Okay.
I was offered the second one, but it was after September 11th, and I really didn't want to be away from home, another year.
Understood.
Which those were, 1 year commitments practically. So,
Wow.
but that again was a very special experience, just because of the cast and the crew. And I had worked with Chris Columbus when he came to write Goonies at Amblin, so I had known Chris for 30 years by that time,
Wow.
and worked with a fantastic editor, Richard Francis Bruce, who cut Seven and Shawshank Redemption and The Rock and Green Mile. This guy, and he was such a sweet man. Brought his family over with him, and it wasn't even like working on a movie. Yes, there was pressure, but we just had such a great time together. All, the entire post-production crew and I, that it didn't seem like work.
That's actually from that film franchise alone. That's actually what I heard with a lot of people involved in it, is
Yeah.
that it didn't feel like work. It felt like a lot of like play and hanging out, especially for the producers, for the filmers, the especially for the kids. The kids were always caught on camera playing games with each other and just acting like kids. You guys gave them a home for so many years.
Yeah, I mean they were kids, that's the thing. When you work on a movie and when you have someone like Daniel Radcliffe who's expected to carry a billion-dollar franchise or multi-billion-dollar franchise, that creates a lot of pressure. And so you want the kids to be kids as long as possible
Yes.
because, child actors tend to lose their childhoods um, because of professional commitments. So, whether it was Sean Astin, the Goonies kids, or Jason or whoever, you want to make sure that they are as comfortable as they can be and not feel pressure so that they can do their best work and also then go off and play for a while.
Absolutely. Number three, we have Star Wars.
Not Star Wars, but Empire Strikes Back. I was a PA at Lucasfilm at the time, and based out of the Egg Company, and I became friends with Craig Miller, who was a publicist at Lucasfilm and also the director of fan relations. So he's the one who oversaw the million plus subscribers and edited the Star Wars newsletter, things like that. And Craig gave me a chance early on to write some of the articles and accompany him on some of the interviews, like the one with Harrison Ford. And it gave me a confidence because I never considered myself a writer. And even after writing the book, I don't consider myself a writer. But it was fun to explore that area. And then when Craig was scheduled to go to London during production to interview cast and crew, he asked if I wanted to go along. He asked Sid Ganis, who was the head of worldwide advertising and publicity, and Sid gave his blessing, and so I ended up going to London. Um, they were shooting on the Star Wars silent stage. They were shooting the Hoth sequences, and so I had a chance to experience that side of it, and that awakened kind of a desire in me to explore myself literally, and literarily, however you say it. No, it was each challenge gave me an opportunity to explore a different area, which you couldn't ask for anything better.
I 100% agree with that. About a year ago, I was given an opportunity to work on a film with a friend of mine, and it gave me the confidence to do what I'm doing now, my own projects and doing these interviews with people involved in the industry. You kind of need that push of confidence to be able to go out there and figure out what you want.
That's right. That's right.
Uh,
And you're blessed if you meet people who give you that opportunity because it's hard to create that on your own
it is.
in a industry like the film industry. But uh, you know, we the film industry is unique in that it runs on ideas and dreams and magic and people who believe in you, you know, create that for you. So I will forever be grateful for every opportunity.
That's great to hear. So if you don't mind, I have a couple questions for you today.
Sure, of
You
course.
got it. My first question for you is, what is it like to have such an amazing career working on such iconic films, and which one was your favorite to work on?
Oh gosh. Well, it's almost indescribable. I don't know if I can put it fully into words because, um, you know, I wanted to be in movies from the time I started going to. I didn't realize it, I guess, at the time, but when I was going to the Disney movies, the Saturday matinees in my hometown, um, there was something that just fascinated me, and I didn't know how it worked or anything else, but I thought, you know, people do that for a living, and when I one day was going through a local bookstore and found a book called The Total Filmmaker by Jerry Lewis, who, after, in the midst of a storied career as an actor and director, um, started lecturing at USC. And the book was taken from his lectures, and it just opened up the world to me. So that was kind of the first gift. Um, and then it just seemed like things naturally fell into place. Meeting Howard or going to SC for the summer, um, when they were actually going to cancel it because the head of the cinema department had passed away suddenly, and his widow was deciding whether or not to continue the series. And fortunately, she did, and I was one of the first ones to apply. So there was that, and then meeting Howard, and then moving out to LA, and getting to work on graffiti. Before that, actually, I worked for a special effects house that did commercials and did low budget films like Piranha. But the guys that I met who hired me to come in to work as a PA for a day and then extended into 2 weeks and then 2 months, um, kind of formed the foundation for what I was to learn. So, I got that job, and then I got graffiti. I stayed at Lucasfilm, met Steven, got Amblin, met Donnor during Goonies, and he ended up hiring me and gave me the opportunity to actually really expand my world by getting into production. So it's uh, I don't know how to describe it, I guess, except um, kismet, maybe. I don't know. But I know that it wasn't anything that I could have done on my own. And as far as films that are my favorite, it's like asking which kid is your favorite. Um, uh, each film, with maybe a couple of exceptions, were special in their own way. With Goonies, it was my first time on a set where I felt like I belonged. Um, and being on location with that cast and crew, we really did become a family. Um, uh, I still keep in touch with the kids, and got a, a nice message from Robert Davi and Joey Pants when after my heart attack, and so um, that was a really special thing. As you said, Free Willy was um, was amazing because it gave me a chance to explore the production process as a whole, and of course I loved the cast and crew on that too. And Harry Potter, 61 Asterisk, which was an HBO picture, um, directed by Billy Crystal, uh, gave me a chance to work with Billy and a great editor named Michael Jablow. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know, if I guess if I had to single one out uh, at all, it would probably be Goonies because that's where really it all kind of started in earnest.
Wow. Before we get to the next question, I would just like to say that it is absolutely incredible that your career started after just reading a book about filmmaking. It's amazing to me because growing up, you read these books that teach you something that you want to do, that teach you what you desire to be a part of, and actually going through and following it as you did, that's inspiring. And that just came from a book, everything that you got into.
Well, thank you. Originally, when I thought filmmaking would be out of reach, my main emphasis was music, and I got a voice scholarship to a local college, and and then I heard Luciano Pavarotti sing and thought, no, there's no way. So that's when I started kind of really turning my attention toward film. Um, and but I still love music, and in fact, scoring is one of my favorite things in all the process.
Wow.
And getting to hear John Williams, getting to hear his score for the first time on Temple of Doom or Empire of the Sun or Harry Potter, and 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 be able to follow along because of my musical training was really something special for me. But yeah, I mean, it's, back in the 70s, um, movie making was still kind of, it wasn't, there was no internet, there was no social media. You might get a little featurette on behind the scenes of a major motion picture on PBS or as a filler in a movie night on TV. But, it wasn't widely known, what anybody did. Um, I, of course, I think people still don't know what a best boy does, or a gaffer, but back then it was a total mystery. So yeah, I mean, it did. It opened up my world, and then I realized that people, number one, did it for a living. They got paid for it, and that it could be fun. And with my short attention span, I was a very type A personality, and the thought of sitting doing something repetitiously every day or having the same thing happen every day just it filled me with it almost made me suicidal. So the chance to be on in film where something different happens every day, there's a different problem every day, and you find the solution was really challenging to me and very exciting.
I believe the challenge is definitely real, especially because the film industry is consistently changing. It's never the same. I mean, you started back in the 70s, you said, right? I'm
Yes.
sure back in the 70s versus how it is now is an extreme difference to you.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, we shot and edited on film, and sound was cut on 35 millimeter mag film. Now, you with a few keystrokes, you can cut a scene a thousand different ways. Back then, you had trim bins, and you might have one frame of a film on a hook, and if the director wanted that one frame put back in, the editor had to go searching for it and then cut it in with a splicer. But it was I considered it a very romantic period because the the crews worked so well together. That hasn't changed. The fact that the crews can do amazing things uh, no matter what the director wants. They can make it happen. And now there's just more tools, whether it's drones or whatever, or cranes to make that happen. So yeah, a lot's changed, but I still hold a great fondness for celluloid, the smell of it, the feel of it, going into a lab like Technicolor back in the day, and smelling the bath and watching how film was developed. It was fascinating, endlessly fascinating. So yeah, I think, and of course, you know, that was when I joined in January 78. That was, 8 months after Star Wars was released. So the industry was just buzzing like crazy. And so many films were being made, television shows. You couldn't get space on a studio lot because so much was going on.
Right.
So the industry was at a running at a pace that that I just thought was amazing. And of course, now it's going through a tremendous um, upheaval, and the word hasn't been written yet on what is going to shake out of that.
It's kind of scary to think about. You don't know what's going to happen within the next 5 years, let alone the next 5 weeks with everything. So earlier I had asked you what your favorite film that you worked on, and you singled out The Goonies. This is where my next question comes in for you. I was wondering if you could tell us about your time on the Goonies and what the experience was like working with the cast at that time.
First of all, as Steven's personal assistant, I was tethered to Amblin. When Chris turned in the first draft, pre-production started, and although there were many drafts later to follow, it was still uh, things were happening quickly. And so I was involved in running the camera for the casting sessions and things like that. But when they started production, they moved to Astoria, Oregon, to shoot for I think 7 weeks, and it became very quiet. And I missed the pace, and so I had a week's vacation coming. I was in my first year at Amblin, and so I asked Stephen if I could go up to um, Astoria to watch him shoot for a week. And he said, well, it's fine for me, but call Donnor and get his permission. So I called Jenny Lou Tugend and who was Dick's executive assistant at the time and said, I would love to come up and just watch you shoot for a week. And she said, well, let me talk to Dick. And that afternoon, I think I was in the projection booth talking to the projectionist at Amblin, and I got a phone call, and it was Dick's personal assistant, Michael Thaw, and he said, uh, "Do you still want to come up to Astoria?" And I said, "Well, is there is I could tell by his voice that it was a little uncertain." And I said, "Well, is there a problem?" And he said, "Yeah, there's a problem." Dick said, "If you're crazy enough to want to come up to Astoria, he's paying for your ticket." So that was the legendary generosity of Dick Donner, who if I talk too much about him, I'll start crying. But anyway, so I ended up flying up uh, on a I can't remember the date I flew up. I think it was after the first week of shooting, and I flew up with John Matuzak and his stunt double Randy Widener, and got to the production office and realized um, that I didn't have a hotel room. And, it was kind of, I've since learned to anticipate things. But back then, I was just so excited. So, and there were no hotel rooms at all in Astoria. The crew and cast had them all. So I thought, well, I'll sleep in one of the honey wagons in one of the dressing rooms. And it might get a bit cold, but I'll get a blanket. I'll be fine. And it just so happened that Sean Astin's guardian, Pepe Passarelli, um, said, "Look, I really need help. Uh, all these little girls are storming Sean's room, and he doesn't get any rest. So if you can stay in his room and with him, and I'll be right next door, and we'll just double team, the security for him." So I said I was very grateful and said thank you, and ended up. So at least I had a place to stay for the time I was up there, which was only going to be a week originally. But the second or third day, Dick put me to work on second unit. So I ended up working on the movie. And then Steven came up to direct some of the second unit, the jailbreak and all that. And I guess he had arranged with Steven for me to stay up there. So I did for the rest of the shoot, and then came home with the cast and crew on a chartered flight into Burbank. And then when second unit started, um, uh, on the studio lot at Warner Brothers, um, Dick asked Steven if he would direct second unit because with having the kids as main characters, they can only work a certain number of hours during the day. They have to be allowed time for school, for recreation, for lunch. And so the hours they can shoot are severely reduced. And they're in every scene, just about. So um, Steven said, yeah, he would do it. And because I was Steven's assistant, personal assistant, I ended up being on the set with him every day.
Wow.
And we would be shooting the wishing well scenes or the organ chamber while Dick was on stage 16 shooting on the pirate ship. And and since I'd already known the cast and the crew from Astoria, we just kind of fell into that friendly banter that you do, and um, became a very special thing, and when it was over, everybody went their separate ways. Um, Dick and Stephen both had crews they worked with, the same crews, and so it was a chance to see people all the time. And I ended up kind of babysitting Sean and his younger brother Mac for a couple of years while their mom Patty Duke would be on location or whatever. So it really, like I said, I've known them for over 40 years, and it's just weird to know that they all have families of their own, and we've lost a few like Annie Ramsey and um, Logan Ramsey, Keith Walker, who by the way, while he was up in Astoria waiting for his scenes to be filmed, Keith was a writer, and he would walk around Astoria and came up with the idea about a boy and a killer whale, which became Free Willy.
Wow.
So Mikey's father wrote Free Willy. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, it was just yeah, it was an amazing time.